Welcome to TutorLyft's Parenting Series, featuring insights from leading experts in parenting and education. My name is Omar Andani, and I'm the founder of TutorLyft. Today, we're joined by Joe Rich, a renowned family therapist and prominent media personality. With decades of experience in family dynamics, Joe is best known for regular appearances on nationally syndicated shows like Cityline and the Marilyn Dennis Show, and is also a respected TEDx speaker. His work translates complex psychological concepts into practical parenting advice. Join us as we explore its insights on fostering a nurturing home environment.
I call this the listener is expert. I have expertise, but the person who's listening has expertise on their life. And I like to see it as collaborative. So I like to see this kind of experiences. I'll give some ideas from my own expertise from working with families or teens, but I want people to also be empowered to think of themselves as expert and not say, oh, that wouldn't work for me, but to be able to say, hey, that idea wouldn't work for me in that way, but I know my kid best, or I know my situation best. I think if I tweak it like this, that could really work for me. So that becomes my orientation. Certainly the most common themes for me in terms of adolescence. Well, the first one is that parents who are great parents of kids up to about age 12 are not necessarily great parents for adolescents, because there's a notion that I'm a really good parent and I go all the way along and I do all the things that Barbara Coloroso talks about, and I'm consistent and I have expectations and blah, blah, blah. And then I hit this adolescent and I'm doing the same parenting, but really my child is completely different. And so what happens is the parents often begin in adolescence to start to feel a sense of failure or that something's wrong, and sometimes even blame the child, sometimes even blame them for not responding the way they used to respond. And so we know that this sounds easy, but it's a lot more difficult, right? So all of a sudden, I've been a great parent. I want to continue on that little journey. And I find out that a lot of the things that made me a great parent are going to be conflictual with my adolescent. There's no question. And so for a lot of parents, it's a wake-up call. And they do look for information and ideas about how to parent an adolescent, even though the truth of the matter is those skills probably are only going to be relevant for about 4 or 5 years. And then you're done with all that. So it's a very specific period of time. For a lot of parents, it's a bit of a surprise. Even though they listen to this and watch this, all of a sudden it happens and they're like, what happened? And that's the first thing that is probably even common all the way along, where people will say, gee, we're so happy. The family was so great. Everything was going fantastic. And now he is behaving like this, right? The second one is, and this has been common all the way along, even when I was a camp counselor, this developmental stage has 2 things going on at the same time that don't really go together. 1, rebellion. They want to rebel. And 2, they want to conform. So they're stuck with both of these 2 ideas, in social ideas, and they don't really go together well. So often the rebel is at home, at school, authority, and the conform is the peer group. And so for adolescents, this is a conflict already. And then at home, we realize we get all the rebel, right? And this is where parents say things like, your family's more important than your friends. And they use all those kinds of statements because they don't really know what to say. But what really is happening is in some ways, and I know it sounds silly, we would prefer the rebellion at home so that it's manageable and we know what's going on than the rebellion in the world at large. So there's this sense of, we try to understand the conformity. Why do you have to have those running shoes that cost $290? We understand, oh, that's the conforming part. And why are you so miserable to me when I take you to the running shoe store? Oh, that's the rebelling part. I don't want anybody to see my mother. So parents are often in that spot. And I think long-term, these have been the same spots all the way along. They're enacted differently because today it might be running shoes. Another time it might have been blue jeans, but it's enacted in the exact same way. So for a lot of parents at adolescence, it's a bit of a wake-up call. And then for many parents, the first adolescent is harder to parent because so much of this is new. And they often have kids who are younger. And so now we're expected to do parenting the adolescent and parenting sort of the school-age child at the exact same time. And this is where the family can have its own conflict, because this parenting is a lot easier, interestingly enough, than this parent. This parenting of younger kids is physical. The parenting of older kids is often emotional It's more taxing. It's more psychologically based. There's a lot more thinking that goes with it, not just strategies, but thinking about the strategies. The number one strategy that I say to parents all the time is, at this stage, doing nothing is doing something. This is a stage where do not walk behind them and pick up on every single thing that goes on during the day. Sometimes you just got to make a decision that if I do nothing, this will pass. It'll all just go on by, right? And I won't have made it into something else. So a typical adolescent pattern is a parent will say, they're so disrespectful. They come home every day from school. They don't even say hello. So I realized that's a little disturbing, right? It's not great. And I may even have made you a snack because I'm still parenting like you're a kid. I may even want to sit down at the table and hear about all your friends and everything that happened. And you walk in the door with your headphones on and go straight up the stairs and slam the door. And so for a lot of parents, we realize that they go upstairs and they knock on the door and they say, you can't come in this house and not say hello to me. And it's rude and it's disrespectful. Keeping in mind, this is the same child they parented for 13 and a half, 14 years. The kid knows that. The kid's already heard about this. They're not paying any attention to this. They're thinking about that girl at school. That's on their mind. They don't have time for you. And so for a lot of parents, I say that would be a really good place for us to think about. Doing nothing might be doing something. Maybe it doesn't actually mean anything in terms of your relationship with them. Maybe they still love you. Maybe they still care about you. Maybe they still respect you. Maybe that's just an adolescent behavior. Maybe that will even pass, right? So sometimes I say to parents, doing nothing is actually doing something with an adolescent. Sometimes just let it be. Just leave it alone. It'll go by. They've spent the first 14 years with you. They know everything you're going to say, everything you think, everything you expect. They've already got it, right? They've already got it. Yeah, I tell a funny story. One of my kids getting in the car, right? And I'm giving them a ride to school. And they're just miserable. They're just being so miserable to me. And halfway on the drive, I say to them, can I ask you a question? What? They say like that. I say, for the first 13, 14 years of your life, did I cover nice? Did I mention the word nice or anything like that? And so they start laughing because it's funny, right? And they said, yes, you did. And I say, just checking. Want to make sure I covered the material. And then they don't get overly nice, but we have a little laugh because we're going to school and they're worried about their friends and what they're wearing and maybe the studying they didn't do or the test that they got to have, or they're busy with that. They're not busy with me. But I still would like to just have a laugh and whatever it may be. And then when they get out of the car, they say, thanks. I say, oh, you're welcome. And I remember, oh, right, I covered this. Please, thank you. Remember that? And it's being able to neutralize all of that. If you really need to pick it up, then pick it up in a way that's meaningless. Pick it up in a way that doesn't mean that much, because doing nothing is doing something. That's not true for the early parenting. The early parenting for small kids and for preschool kids upwards to this age, you need to be on everything. The more you're on, the more you can help them with, the more you can be in touch with, the more you know what's going on. The second one is called Think Long, which is the name of my book, is Parenting the Long Journey. But thinking long with an adolescent means they are going to try engage you in this. They love nothing better than this. I hate this family. That sense of I'm locked in, help, I'm locked in. And for parents, this is what's happening right now. But parents have the option of looking forward and thinking about a horizon line where their teenager is an adult or a young adult, and they can explore the world together and spend time together. And as a parent, you don't want to do or say anything right now that's going to be carried forward. The kids might, but we're going to forgive that because we're the parents. But we have to be very careful when we're locked in. We have to realize this is how we are locked in like this. We have to learn how to look to the horizon. What is it I really want from this parenting kids experience? And it's a long-term good connection with my young adult children at the end of this. So I got to be careful that this isn't going to wreck that. And that is a way of thinking that you don't do when kids are little. It's a way of thinking that is important when you have somebody in a developmental stage that we'll call oppositional. And if they want to be oppositional, go ahead, but I don't fight. I'm not the guy that fights. And then the third one is remembering to keep in mind all the big stuff. There are big issues in adolescence: depression, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, sexual acting out, pregnancy, eating disorders. There's some big stuff. And all of a sudden, not saying hello when you come home looks like nothing. All of a sudden, all that just looks like nothing. So a little bit of it is, what is the perspective on this parenting, right? And for young kids, a lot of the perspective is safety, making sure that they're okay. You know where they are, you know what they're doing, you know who their friends are, you pick them up, you drop them off, you know the teacher. This is the next step where it's about the big issues. If I don't have any of the big issues, right, I'm good. So if I have a messy room and I don't have any of these issues, I'm good. And this is the perspective on parenting adolescents, changing the perspective. Yes, it's important to teach the little ones to make their bed and brush their teeth and blah, blah, blah. But this is where we gain that perspective in adolescence, because these are the issues of adolescence. The real issues are the big issues, right? You don't often find those big issues with smaller kids, but you do with bigger kids. And so those are the real. And as we do that, we realize that they're busy working through all this stuff: drugs, alcohol, sexuality, sexual identity. They are actually busy with all of these things. We're busy with these things in a bad way. We're busy in, do I have a problem? Houston, do we have a problem here? And if we don't, then we just thank our lucky stars. And if we do, then we really hone in on that problem. Then we really get to that problem. Forget about the room, the saying hello, the crazy haircut, the tattoo on your left arm. Try and just let go of all that stuff and just be busy with what's really important. And that's the place of relationship and connectedness, right? That's the place where kids really appreciate it. If you're a parent and that's what you need to be doing, then you need to approach it with acceptance and not with judgment. How could you be so stupid is not going to open up this problem for us to solve together. Hey, you made a mistake. People make mistakes. Let's figure out what we're going to do is going to open up that problem. So for parents, sometimes the true test is not to be judgmental, but to actually be accepting of what their adolescent's life could be like and how they can access being helpful to it if they have to. A little bit of this is starting off small and then realizing it could be big. If it's small, doing nothing is doing something real, like really reminding yourself of that. First of all, in the world of relationships and mental health, right? If you spot somebody who is dealing with something, let's say like depression or drug abuse or whatever, any of the big stuff, your role is not to be the psychiatrist or the nurse or any of that stuff. Your role is really to get the person to help. The way we help best is get people to help. For parents of all ilks, the parents that are good communicators and bad communicators and all the rest of it, the notion is, if you think that one of your kids is really dealing with a significant issue in this way, helping them is really getting them to help. And people will say, oh, there's lineups and there's psychiatrists and it costs money, and they'll make up all kinds of stuff. But the truth of the matter is, we have a complete infrastructure that is helpful to today's adolescents. And it's just a question of Googling it and accessing it and figuring out how to get there. The school is a really good start in terms of being able to find out what resources they can offer you. And so I often say, if the talking isn't going great with your kid, don't worry about that, because the talking is really just talking. Getting help becomes really important. When we really think about it, we're too close to really be that helpful. We are just too close to be that helpful. And getting your kids to help, I think, is a remarkably important thing to do. Finding a team. So the parent needs to build a team. So let's say this is completely foreign to me, right? And I just don't know. But the woman next door that I live next door to, she's always talking to people and very busy. I may say to her, if my son's struggling, any ideas of what I could do or where I could go? So building a team becomes really important. You don't have to be isolated at home just with the problem. The teenager will often say, don't tell anybody, right? And there's a lot of ambivalence for teens around don't tell anybody, right? But telling someone who's professional or being helpful, that's not telling somebody. They mean, don't go on the telephone when you talk to your sister once a day after dinner. Don't get on the telephone and tell her that I'm dealing with this. That's really what they mean, because they really don't want that to happen. They don't want people to know. And this gets back to rebellion and conformity, right? I don't want to feel different, right? I don't want to be different. And the breaking of the ice, sometimes the ice is you talk too much. So I often say to parents, you know what? If you look at the word listen, Listen, those letters also spell the word Silent. So stop talking and be silent. How are you doing? And then stop talking and find out how they're doing. And then if you start talking too much, remind yourself, Silent. And then those same letters spell the word enlist, Enlist. And once you do stop talking and listen, enlist the help that you really need to address the problem. So keeping in mind as a parent, don't isolate yourself with your adolescence issues. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. And the burden is enormous. Parents of today's adolescents are at a disadvantage because the real training ground is in the earlier parenting. The real training ground for use of media is in the parenting of sort of 0 to 12 or 13. Without having had that experience, we face what we're facing now. And that is what we call the internet addiction or whatever you want to call it. But kids are on all the time. But in fairness, Omar, everyone is on all the time because unfortunately, I've just unfolded into media, right? I just have my phone and just used it more. And then I used to flip it open and now I don't have to flip it open. And now I can push a button and now I can yell at it across the room, call my mother. And I'm also in the same boat, right? So a little bit of it is too close to the adolescents still, right? With our younger kids, there are a lot of good strategies. With adolescents, we have to be realistic that it's going to be very hard to control this. So we have to be cautious that we are talking with them about media. We're doing that. But the truth of the matter is that if we think that our average adolescent hasn't accessed porn on their phone, then we're kidding ourselves. Like we're just joking ourselves. So it means being able to not polarize around the issue, but to be able to share around the issue, to be able to say, you know what, I'm thinking a little bit about taking Instagram off of my phone and just leaving it on the computer because I'm wasting a lot of time during the day looking at Instagram. How about you? And it's funny because 10 years ago when I talked about parenting, I told parents to go get a phone so they could join up with their kids, right? I remember once many years ago, I sent a picture of my daughter's room. I took a picture and I sent it to her while she was at her girlfriend's. And I said, come home and clean this up. And her girlfriend was amazed that I could send a picture. She said, now your dad knows how to send a picture. Wow. But I was in it early because I was interested in how it was affecting kids and how it worked and that kind of stuff. But we're all in this together. The one thing I will tell you is that 10 years ago, it was acceptable as a punishment to take your child's phone away. Right now, it would have to be a fairly enormous issue that is going on that telephone for you to take that phone away. The kind of isolation that happens when parents try to stop kids from having it. I'm not talking about limiting, but stop kids from having it as a punishment. It's not a punishment. It's like shooting a mouse with an elephant gun. It's just an enormous kind of punishment. But if your child is soliciting sexual activity for money, if your child is dealing drugs, then you have to figure out what are the big time issues here and how do I deal with it? But it's probably better to think, okay, this is a family. We have a big bowl upstairs and at midnight, everybody just leaves their telephone in the bowl and picks it up in the morning. And that's just what we all do, right? That's just how we do it. And even then, it's not difficult for kids to have iPads and telephones and watches, and there's a lot of alternatives. But let's not waste too much of our parenting on something that we realize it's probably better for us to just talk a bit about it. It's better to be able to say, you know what? I saw this on Instagram today. It was shocking. What's the most shocking thing you've ever seen on Instagram? And see if we could have that conversation at least. With younger kids, you need to begin the process of getting them to manage their technology. You need to get them to a spot where you say, what time can I expect you to be off of your phone? And then not yelling, it's 8 o'clock, but going upstairs at 9 o'clock and saying, you told me 8 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock now. What are you going to do about being able to manage this telephone? And it's presenting some interesting dilemmas, but we're not Luddites. We are people who use technology in every way. In fact, even something like this would never happen if we didn't have technology. And I'm completely aware of that. I see it as more a mutual issue than a parenting issue. What I'm dealing with is actually what my adolescent's dealing with. Probably the last minute advice is there's a bit of science to parenting adolescents and a bit of art, and it is an art and science. And the science of it might be the strategies, but the art of it is timing and place and reading the room. And both together will create a better combination. But it also reminds us it's not a perfect science, that if you're aiming for perfect, you're not going to get there. So I like to say to parents, whether it's in the moment or in the day, really thinking about how can I just do better? Can I get to a place that's better? And then when I get to that place, I feel better. It's not perfect, but I feel better. And this is really being able to say, when you parent adolescents, you're going to have to forgive yourself at certain moments for not getting to the place you wanted to get to, or maybe using a strategy that didn't work. So a little bit of it is build a peer group with your own peers as parents so that you can learn to chat together and forgive each other and maybe take that moment. And if it's not that serious, let it go. So I think that's part of the parenting for adolescents that maybe isn't so strong for younger kids. But in adolescence, it ain't a perfect science. Make sure you figure out how to forgive yourself and let it go. Thank you.